It is now my pleasure to introduce a good friend and partner to the Brookings program and the Global Cities Initiative, which is Peter Scheer. He is the Executive Vice President and Head of Corporate Responsibility for JPMorgan Chase, and he is being joined now by former Secretary Bill Daley and Ambassador Carla Hills.
Okay, so while the ambassador and the secretary are getting mic'd up, why don't I go ahead and get started just in the interest of time. First of all, thank you to Amy and to the Brookings team and to Bruce Katz in absentia. I think you see why our partnership with Brookings is so valuable and why they are now consistently ranked as one of the most respected think tanks around the world. The data-driven focus, the research focus is really unparalleled. So I want to thank Amy for a tremendous presentation, for all the work that they do. I also want to acknowledge Mayor Stanton. I don't know if he is still here. Curtis, in his introduction, talked about collaboration. I think one of the things that we see as we've taken this initiative all over the world, frankly, is that one of the key signs to success for a city is where you bring together, just like is represented in this room, people from the private sector and the public sector and academia and the business community to collaborate on a common goal, and it's so important. The other thing that the mayor mentioned, which I want to just call out, is his focus on the regional approach, and this is something that Mayor Rich Daley, former Mayor Daley, who chairs our Global Cities Initiative and couldn't be here, I think some distant relation to the secretary, talks about all the time. Some of the success of Chicago is approaching things from a regional perspective. So thank you all. We're really pleased to bring this initiative to Phoenix. We're even more thrilled that Phoenix was selected to be part of the Global Cities Exchange, which we think is an important step in really maximizing the potential that Phoenix has as a global city. And one of the tenets of this initiative is to understand how global trade impacts economic growth. And I don't think we could have two people more suited to talk about this issue than our two guests. Ambassador Carla Hills actually has served as both the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development and as the United States Trade Representative. Now chairs Hills and Company, is very active, continues to be very active in international relations, is the co-chair of the Council on Foreign Relations, the chair of the U.S. Committee on China Relations, and most important, a member of the JPMorgan International Council, so we get the benefit of her advice and counsel on a regular basis. And Secretary Bill Daley, who many of you know from his many years of public service, having served as the Commerce Secretary, as the Chief of Staff to President Obama, as the second best head of corporate responsibility in the history of JPMorgan Chase. He hired me, so I had to throw that in. And just recently joined.
We all make mistakes.
Just recently joined Argentier Capital, and I think appropriate for this conversation was the person tapped by President Clinton to help convince Congress to approve the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is where I'd like to start the conversation. So we've now marked the 20th anniversary of NAFTA. Amy talked about the impact on Phoenix. Today, the United States has $1.2 trillion worth of goods and services trades with Mexico and Canada. And if you put it in context, it is roughly the same amount of our total trade with Japan, Korea, and all 5 of the BRIC nations, Brazil, India, China, and South Africa. So, Ambassador Hills, you were there at the inception of this. You negotiated with Canada and Mexico on this agreement. Give us a sense of why it was important at the time to enter into such agreement. What was the thinking back in the late 80s when you started this initiative?
The administration was keen about opening markets, and I think for all the reasons that Amy Lou and you and the mayor have very, very well spelled out. With 5% of the world's population producing 20% of the world's output, we had to find markets beyond our shores. And we had, late in the 80s, negotiated with Canada. We were approached by Mexico who said, me too. We'd like to be a free trade agreement with the United States. And we found that absolutely a wonderful opportunity for a number of reasons. One is that Mexico was highly restricted. Their industrial tariffs were many times higher than ours. Our services could not get into the market. Investment was restricted. Their intellectual property protection was deficient. And we said, here's an opportunity. If we sit down and open up the market, the Uruguay round, multilateral trade, had collapsed in Brussels in 1990. We believed that if we could open up the North American region, that there would be competitive liberalization, that we would give a bang to the rest of the world. And in fact, that did occur. We negotiated a wonderful agreement with Mexico that eliminated industrial tariffs, opened up the agricultural market, which we have not done globally to this day, got a splendid, world-class intellectual property protection, protected our services, which now account for 80% of our exports, as Amy pointed out, and had protections for investors. And within 4 months of completing that agreement, all 123 then members of the World Trade Organization came back and created the World Trade Organization and completed the Uruguay round to the benefit of the global economy.
And you were criticized by a lot of other nations outside of NAFTA for pursuing NAFTA, and the fear or the criticism was that you were doing this at the expense of the Uruguay round. And
Correct.
Do you think the opposite happened?
I believe, I'm a fervent multilateralist. I believe that we could get the Doha regime done. But there's something magical about competitive liberalization. You get a massive agreement like the transatlantic or the trans-Pacific, and others do not want to be left out. Maybe it's the trade diversion, maybe it is a bunch of reasons, but there is a reality in competitive liberalization. That is what NAFTA did, and it made the North American region the most competitive region of the world. But as has been pointed out, we have lapsed in our energy, and so I compliment JPMorgan, Brookings, Phoenix for moving forward on globalization of cities, because there is a path forward.
So, Secretary Daley, Ambassador Hills and President Bush kind of passed the baton to you and President Clinton in '93, and you were I don't know what you had done wrong, but President Clinton called you one day and said, "I need you to convince Congress to approve this," which was not an easy argument. Tell us how the challenges you faced in convincing the Congress and the dynamic that you had to overcome.
Well, if you remember, the president had just come in 1993. He had a brutal budget fight in the summer of '93 with the tax increase as part of that, passed by one vote in the Congress, with only one party passing it. And off of that brutal fight, the president continued his initiative to pass NAFTA. And introduced it. And many people on the Democratic side thought he was crazy. Obviously, he was going right at the base of the Democratic Party, labor. And at the time, this is 20 years ago. And so the people who feared NAFTA, feared globalization the most, were the most vocal. The president, I knew, knowing him before his election, how important he thought NAFTA was to getting our economy going. Much of the world was beginning, obviously, to open up. You had the fall of the Berlin Wall, the whole Eastern European. Everyone wanted what the United States had. That was liberalism, markets, dynamic economy, and they wanted that. And the President Clinton at the time, knew that. But he also knew it was going to be a brutal fight. And it was beyond, to be frank with you, anything I thought. Had I known how bad it was going to be, I probably wouldn't have been so stupid to take the job. But I also believe strongly that NAFTA, and then in the year 2000, the passage of the permanent normal trade and therefore allowing China and then the WTO were probably the two most meaningful things that occurred in those 8 years that have had an enormous impact. The NAFTA fight was really difficult. We got a fair shake, I will say this. I've never seen a president spend as much time on one issue, to the point where, to be frank with you, I kind of felt guilty that he was dedicating so much time to this one issue. But when a president puts his mind to getting something done, especially in those days, generally you can get it done. And the Republicans under Newt Gingrich, I will say he was the not the minority leader, but he was the number two. Gave the president a very fair shake, and we delivered on the Democrats. It was a brutal fight, and probably because of the tax increase in the summer and NAFTA passing, the Democrats lost control of the House. And we knew that may happen.
Why this? I mean, Amy in her presentation, laid out pretty vividly with details and facts and figures the benefits for the United States and for job creation and for higher paying jobs, that result from more engagement internationally. Why is there such a disconnect between the benefits of international trade and the public support for international trade?
I think it's a combination. When you see the negative, and there are negatives to opening markets and trade. There are losers from a dynamic economy like we have for lots of different reasons. But when people see a plant or hear of a plant that closes and moves to Mexico or China or wherever, that's obvious. They'll see those 300 jobs. They won't see the 10 companies that add 500 jobs over a period, not necessarily replacing that same type of job, but different jobs are more dynamic in the new economy. So the negatives are highlighted often, and there's just there's often a sense by many people who in this dynamic economy, and their education isn't at the level. That's why the mayor's efforts on education, and especially higher education in Phoenix and in the region, are so important. Because if that doesn't occur, then you're not going to have that be able to compete globally, and that's a big problem for the United States. But I think it's historic. It's terrible, and right now it's very bad to pass.
You've been involved in all these battles, either inside or outside government. What's your perspective on this?
I think you have to educate the American people, and there's been too little of that, certainly in recent times. When we tried to sell the NAFTA just to get it negotiated, because, we have a divided form of government. The president negotiates with foreign governments under our Constitution. The Congress has control of the purse strings. We need a pact so that if we negotiated an agreement on behalf of the executive branch, the Congress cannot amend it and cause it to unravel. They're not the negotiators. They can vote it down if they don't like it, but it's either voted up or down. And we work very hard. I talked to the Conference of Mayors. We took people, we had 20 private sector groups that advised the president and the U.S. Trade Representative on the needs of various localities and export opportunities. And we took them to Mexico to see what the opportunities could be. But I think that it's you also have to give time to educate what Bill has just said. You see the plant that closes. You don't see the statistics. Most Americans don't know that we sell more to Mexico today than we sell to all the rest of Latin America. We sell more to Mexico today than we sell to Germany, France, Great Britain, and the Netherlands. And we sell more to Mexico today than to the BRICS, Brazil, India, China, and Russia. So these facts should be in their heads so they know that this is an opportunity. And we also have to educate those who are displaced. There is much that we can do both at the global cities level to those who are displaced need to be helped to get back into the economy.
Well, let's talk about the role of cities, because that's obviously what this initiative is all about. And as the Brookings research demonstrates, while these agreements are negotiated at the federal level, they're really, in many ways, about metropolitan areas. You've got 250 cities generating 85% of our GDP, and it's, in some ways, international trade is about trade between major urban areas. Is there more, given the dysfunction at the federal level, which I think there's probably few who would disagree that there's plenty of that to go around, is there more that cities need to do to essentially take matters into their own hands as opposed to waiting for the federal government to step in?
I think the mayors and city councils, Rotary clubs, universities, all need to get into the act. This is their future. This is the benefits if Phoenix can energize its cities. You don't separate Phoenix from Arizona, and you don't separate Arizona from the United States, but we're all working together and get people to stand up and speak out of what the opportunities are. We had a growth pattern in our exports. We got to 36% of global output after the NAFTA. It's since slid down to 26%. I believe that was avoidable. I believe that we could have given more support to our international activities than we have in, say, the last decade. And we need to get back on track.
Bill, obviously your hometown of Chicago is a great example over the last 25 years of becoming a true global city. I think now the fourth largest exporter in the country. What are the things that Chicago has done successfely to take advantage of global markets?
I think, I say with great pride under my brother's leadership, Chicago was always viewed as sort of that Midwestern town, very parochial, yes, large in the scheme of things in the Midwest, and still to this day is not really that known as most cities in the United States between the coast find out, the people around the world. But it took a lot of work by Rich and driving and lots of trips. He did probably, 7, 8, 10 trips to China, to the point where now the tourism in Chicago of Chinese citizens is unbelievable. I mean, you walk down Michigan Avenue, and I swear half the people walking down the street are tourists from China, and they spend a lot of money, as we all know. Tourists are a great source of economic growth, but it did take a lot of effort. It took a lot of time. The mayor, I applaud him for his opening of the office in Mexico City, but Rich kind of focused on China, and I think you kind of have to figure. Obviously, being part of the NAFTA corridor here, it's an easy place with Mexico. I would say I'd also start to look east in a very aggressive way. A little more difficult, takes time. Nobody likes their mayor to travel. They all complain, oh, he's off on a junket somewhere. But look at what the CEOs do. They're on the road all the time, and they're on the road in parts of the world, and that's important. So I would, as business leaders of Phoenix and the greater area, really encourage delegations, encourage the mayor. Go. You've got to make them, and there's a lot of competition. Every global city is out there doing the same thing, but it took a lot of work. It took Rich a long time. The first 6, he's mayor a long time, so 21 years, that's a long time. But it's got to be a program that is set with the business community and is aggressively implemented. And it's a lot of work, though. You
talk about Asia, and Carl, obviously you're very involved. The president just came back from a trip to Asia, although not to China, interestingly. And one of the things he was pursuing is this Trans-Pacific partnership, which I think we all would agree, another thing that would have great benefits. He doesn't seem to be, again, getting a lot of traction. I don't know if that's domestic political opposition or it's opposition. Do you think that, at least in the next 2 or 3 years, it's realistic that President Obama could get a major new agreement either through TPP with Asia or his efforts with Europe?
It depends. There are both great opportunities, and believe me, either, and particularly the transatlantic, would have tremendous competitive liberalization. It would galvanize the world. But it's going to take work. And one of the things he does not have is trade promotion authority. We used to call it fast track. That is, we consulted with Congress, and they told us what it was they most wanted to have in the agreement or did not want to have in the agreement. We negotiated with them, we listened carefully, and we kept in touch with them. But we got their agreement that when we finished the negotiation, they would vote what we negotiated either up or down. And they would not amend it and pick it apart and let it unravel. This is very, very important, not only for the United States, but it's important for the party across the table. Why would Abe put rice on the table if he didn't know the agreement was more likely to pass by a vote for or against? Why would he take the political heat at home if he didn't know that that was the process we used? And you have that with all of the other 11 countries, and we may get to 12 plus the United States if South Korea joins, in the Trans-Pacific. But we also have it with Europe. The European Union making up 28 states. And if they do not know that we can deliver, the agreement will be much, much less beneficial to us.
Bill, would you take another call from the president saying, come help me get trade promotion authority past the Congress?
No, I learned my lesson.
No, you've got to do it.
No.
Or give him Carla's number.
Yeah, I'll give him your number. Look at each of these fights have been under President Bush. I remember because I was one of the Democrats who the White House asked to help pass the CAFTA, the Caribbean Trade, a rather small agreement, passed by one vote. And the speaker at the time had to keep the vote open, I think, for 3 hours to find that one last vote. So they are getting very hard. And what you've had is sort of the Democrats left who have traditionally, especially labor obviously, had problems with trade deals. And now you've got they and the sort of libertarians who want us to pull away from much of the world joining forces. That's a powerful combination. And for a little agreement, all due respect to the Caribbean nations who were in that agreement, you talk then about TPP with Asia. These are major things, and I think it's highly unlikely. I do think it's unfortunate if somebody asked me what's the way to respond on the Ukrainian situation, it would be with a European trade deal.
Absolutely.
And just come hell or high water, I'd be trying to push that and get that done and say to Putin, okay, here's our response. We're not sending troops. We're going to stand with Europe, and we're going to stand with all these countries that are trying to help their economy and really do a deal and forget everything else. Not everything else, but that would be the major thrust that I'd be doing. TPP, to be frank with you, I'd put the Atlantic deal on the table way ahead of the TPP right now, just because I think the emotion of the Ukrainian thing.
Well, I totally agree with Bill. I think that both agreements are important. It'll take a lot of support to push this administration forward with an election looming. But the Trans-Pacific deal is a way to reinvigorate the alliance that we created after World War II. We built, through our leadership, the Western liberal model that the rest of the world aspired to for 50 years. And we did that in partnership with Europe. We have let that slide. Europe has felt that we have not been as strong a partner in recent times. But the Trans-Pacific Partnership, where we not only eliminate the tariffs, which are not huge, but because of the size of our two markets, would give a meaningful boost to our economies. But our regulatory maze, which is unnecessary, which is different and costs small businesses hugely, the equivalent of a 50+% tariff on our services like banking, insurance, and the like. We need more time to go into it, but this agreement could give our economy a punch that we would all stand up and cheer for, and it would bring us in close partnership to Europe that would reflect and reinforce the Western liberal model that has made a difference to all of our lives.
Peter, please.
Let me just, and I challenge the business people who are here. When we did NAFTA, CFOs went into their CEOs and said, if this passes, here's the impact on our bottom line.
Right.
That was an enormous advantage. And the business community, I think, did an effort in that fight like I've never seen, I never knew of before and haven't seen since. And so the business community has got to step up. You know, people spend millions and millions, hundreds of $1 million on political campaigns and efforts and advertising for their businesses and blah, blah, blah. And the only way you're going to change this attitude is a major national effort by the business community to step up and say, this isn't short term. It's not just about one trade deal we're trying to get, but get an understanding of the education that the ambassador talked about. And that's not just when there's an opportunity to pass a trade deal that may help your company alone. That's not going to work anymore.
And the business community has a fantastic opportunity with their employees. Really, if you walked outside this beautiful campus and asked the 5 people, do you know what trade adjustment is? Do you know what trade promotion is? Do you know what the TTIP is? You probably would not get what I would call complete answers. But the business community could put up on the bulletin board some facts that say, 37% of our revenues come from our sales to Mexico, that we benefit from our sales across the Atlantic, that if we could get rid of the regulations where we do a test here that is identical to the test on the other side of the Atlantic, we could save X number of dollars. In fact, put in the W-2 a little note that says 12% of your paycheck comes from our international activities. And when we tried to pass the NAFTA, I know of a company that put 12,000 postcards in their basement that people could come down and after they read the benefits that came from the NAFTA, they could write their congressman. But business can't do it alone. It needs to energize their workers. And so their workers don't feel, oh my, I'm going to lose. No, they're not going to lose. They're going to win. And then we will support. By the way, there's a company that if a worker loses a job because the work has been sent 50 miles from that place, whether that be India or their headquarters, they will send them to school for education. And they have now 36,000 advanced degrees as a result of a program that started in 1996. Really something.
Well, and this is one, and I want to go to questions in a minute. So if folks have questions, please get ready. And I think there are people with some microphones. But as you think about some of the big challenges, and Amy mentioned this, and you brought this up. I mentioned both of you. I was just in China, and there's an obsession right now about education and skills. You've got tens of millions of people moving from rural areas into cities. They have 7 million university graduates every year in China who don't want to go into the old economy jobs, but they don't have the skills. How does a city and how does the country deal with the fact that you've got so many job openings and you have so many opportunities in areas that people don't have the skills for those jobs?
I think that this is something that has to be given a priority. I feel that our infrastructure, both our human and our capital, have declined in recent years. We have not given the attention to our roads, our bridges, nor have we given the attention to our young people that are coming up. And this is something that really should be on the front burner of our current agenda.
There's no question, as the mayor knows, and an educated workforce is the best answer to the difficulties of our economy, and the difficulty in a business is to try to get that educated workforce. And I would say, back to my comments earlier about how the city city of Chicago, did their effort over those years. There are more kids in Chicago learning Chinese in the public school system than in San Francisco or any city in America. And that was a concerted effort. And that's difficult, but that's the sort of thing you've got to do. But I agree with the ambassador 100%. But I think the business community's got to step up and to the plate on the trade issues, because the mood is against us. Everything we just said, wonderful sounding, everybody agrees. Trust me, you go outside, not only ask them what TPP was, maybe ask them who the president is. Some people may not. But the mood is very much against our sort of arguments.
Do we have some questions? Got some microphones? There we go.
Thank you. Am I on?
Yep.
I'm with Arizona State University, and we are, as we all know, a major research university. I think the overwhelming, and I may not be accurate, but I believe that the majority of the graduate students, particularly in the sciences at ASU, are coming from abroad, particularly from China and from India. And so ASU, by extension, is an exporter of high-level, high-technology, graduate-level education. And I think too many of the people that receive these degrees are not in a position to stay in the United States and apply these talents. And so my question, which is somewhat trade-related, is are there opportunities to liberalize our visa or whatever it is, the regulations that allow these people who are so ambitious to not only take advantage of the educations that they're getting here, but to take advantage of employment opportunities and build industry? Thank you.
My guess is you're teeing up raw meat to this on this one.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
It's tragic that we have youngsters that come here, graduate top in their class, and we have 65,000 H-1B visas that let them stay, and they're gone in 3 minutes after they're put on the table. This is tragic. We have been a country that has welcomed people coming in, and now we're absolutely not shooting ourselves in the foot, in the head. This is incredible lack of forward thinking, and that has to be changed.
And Bill, you were in the middle of obviously immigration policy as
Yeah,
President Obama
this is. I'm one of those who believes that we should give an application for citizenship or the certificate of citizenship upon graduation from the programs like you're describing. So, but we can't even right now figure out how to deal with an immigration issue that everyone agrees has to be corrected. But yet we sit here. It's crazy, and we are losing. No question about it. We're losing the best and the brightest from around the world. And you know what? The best and the brightest that are here, they're going to see where those other kids are going, and they're going to follow them. Mm-hmm. And they're going to start going there because that's where the innovation and creativity may occur, and then we're really in deep trouble.
One of the accounting firms just came out with a study, which JPMorgan talked about in our annual report, that getting the immigration bill that was before the Senate, I actually think may have passed the Senate, approved, could add 2 to 3% to U.S. GDP for the next 10 years. And so the missed opportunity here, although I don't want to get too political, but I noticed Tom Donahue, who's the president of the U.S. Chamber, who's never known for his shyness or retiring, said if the Republicans don't get immigration done, they shouldn't field a candidate for president in 2016. He just said that yesterday. How is this I don't want to get too political here, but how big an issue is this to the country? Particularly, Amy talked about sort of the rise of the Hispanic population. Obviously, you see in places like Arizona the failure to get a sensible, balanced immigration bill. I mean, is it big political impacts?
A raw political discussion here, which not partisan. I do think that it is. It's getting to the point where if for a Democrat to give a lecture to the Republicans is probably pretty stupid. They're getting to the point that what may occur nationally, what occurred in California after Pete Wilson took his actions, where the Hispanic community interpreted, rightfully so in my opinion, that he was rather anti-Hispanic. And that state's been Democratic and strongly Democratic, and that can happen nationally. And I think if they're, and what's crazy is they get it. Republicans and the business community that supports them understands it. Now there are lots of we are the probably one of the most diverse nations in the world, and we celebrate that diversity. But there are struggles because of that. There are challenges because of that. And we've got to admit it. We've got to deal with them, and we do. But there are lots of places in the country that fear change. We all, in many ways, fear it. And that dynamic that occurs with a very diverse economy makes a lot of people nervous, and we've got to address that, and we've got to understand that that's real, and that's not just craziness, and try to address those in a rational way, with a rational discussion, not the sort of cable TV discussions.
Right. Other questions? I think up front here. There's a microphone coming your way.
Ambassador Hill, you mentioned the Rotary Club, and I was curious why you mentioned the Rotary Club.
The Rotary Club?
Oh, yes.
I don't know why you mentioned the Rotary Club.
I think that groups of business leaders can make a difference. Congressmen have to run every 2 years, and they need to hear from their constituents, and their constituents need to be informed. Business clubs bring people together, talk about the issues, and they learn from it. They should go back to their businesses and take action so that their congressman knows the issue's important, whether it be an H-1B visa to make our immigration system work, however it is, because this stalemate is unacceptable. Now, I work for President Bush Sr. We had a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate. Among my very best friends, the things we got done would not have gotten done without Lloyd Benson, Danny Rostenkowski, and some of the folks that were leading the Democratic Party. And I can tell you that when President Clinton came in and he was trying to pass the NAFTA, he called me, asked me over to the East Room, and wanted me to speak to the various constituents that he was inviting in. And I think that if the business community, you folks here, could really reach out to the people that you elect and say, these are my priorities. We're not getting the kind of educated students that we need. And, you know, excellence begets excellence. If we kept these people here and explain to the American people, do you know that 12% of new businesses in high technology are started by people who are foreign-born? Who knows that? Let's start picking up on the facts that make us a better nation and let us move forward and be a leader in the world. We could do it.
Let me ask you both just one last question.
Don't clap, do it.
Which I think you tee up a great, I mean, you come to a place like Phoenix and you see the leadership here, the political leadership, the business community leadership, the academic leadership from Arizona State and other places. You see that Brookings is bringing the data and people are saying, let's sit down, let's figure out the problem, let's work the problem, and let's come up with solutions and let's collaborate. And you see this in cities, frankly, all over the country. Right? Not the mayor, I don't think once mentioned Democrat, Republican. He's got a job to do. Why is it that it can be done at the local level in so many cities, and it's so difficult to do at the federal level these days?
You know, I will say that the 10 years between when I was in Washington with President Clinton, left in 2000, and then came back with President Obama in 11, I was shocked at how different of a city and the mood politically and the bitterness, anger, you know, and it wasn't like in President Clinton, second term, that we were all singing Kumbaya. They impeached the guy, you know? So it wasn't like it was all happiness and everyone getting along. But it was a remarkable difference in our politics. And, you know, for 100 different reasons. But difficult things like this, trade to get, or immigration. But if we can't do the big things, so the cities, the mayors, the governors, they just do it. You know, they're off doing it, and they can get things done. The mayor didn't. You mentioned it. Doesn't talk about Republicans, Democrats. Yeah, he's a Democrat, I assume, and he's proud of that. But that's not. You're not going to fill a pothole with a Democrat. You're going to fill it with asphalt.
Well, sometimes you might want to fill a pothole with a Democrat.
Some people may. People may. But
we'll save that for
another
day.
It won't stay filled very long.
Carla, let me give you the last comment here on this.
I think that Washington has changed. You're absolutely right. And probably money in politics makes a difference. It drives, even when it comes from the fringes, whether it be the Democratic side or the Republican side, it's not the way it was a decade or so earlier. But we've had problems in the past. It's not always been a smooth road. And I do think that people, if they inform themselves and work together, mayors have small constituencies they can bring together and push their elected leaders. I think you can make a difference. I'm optimistic about the future if, and only if, we all rise up and take an interest, rather than just sitting and saying, there's nothing I can do. Yes, there is something every single one of us can do, and we ought to get on about it.
So let me just say in closing, I've known both Bill Daley and Carla Hills for many years, and some of you may know the famous speech that President Theodore Roosevelt gave back in Paris in the early part of the 20th century, talking about the man in the arena, the people who continue to sort of fight away and battle away. These are two people, whether they've been in public office or in private office, continue to be part of the battle to do what's best for this nation. And we appreciate you being here.